Hey everybody, I hope you stick around for this build as this is one of the coolest builds I've done, and I'm going to show you the process and the necessary steps that we took to get it done right. My buddy Kris, who owns Hellbound Customs, he builds hot rods for a living. He reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in doing a bed for this 1950 Fargo. I thought this was a really cool idea and a great opportunity to try something totally different with walnut and resin. When I went over to Kris's shop to make the 10 plate, I brought a piece of walnut and I brought a piece of willow with me, and walnut was the better choice for this. So what I had to do first was build a template. And I built my templates out of 10 plast. 10 plast is like a plastic sheet you can get at a hardware store. It's kind of like what they use for garage sale signs. So it cuts easily with a knife. You can draw on it with a Sharpie, and it works great for making templates. Once I have my templates made, I can head back to my shop and start getting my lumber milled up to size. For the material, I'm using 1-inch thick walnut slabs, and I'm cutting this one in half. This is going to be the two outside edges, and then I'm going to put multiple pieces in between these for the rest of the bed. Now what I'm laying out on the floor here isn't exactly how it finished out. I ended up moving two pieces over and adding a third piece in the middle there. Just looked better and used less resin that way. Now I'm just going to cut these, leaving them a little bit longer than they need to be. That way when I'm all finished up with the form and the resin and everything's cured, then I can cut this down to the proper size that it needs to be. I'm using a draw knife here. This is just a super sharp piece of steel with two handles, and you can see how it gets under that bark and peels it away. And then what I do when I'm done this is I go over it with a wire wheel on a drill and scuff up that edge. This is an important step in any resin build, as you want to get rid of all of those loose layers so that you do have a really good bond between your wood and the resin. Also, you don't want any pieces of bark or loose wood coming free and floating into your resin. Okay, things are going good now. The wood is cleaned up, the form is built, and the base of the form that you see here, that is called puckboard, that white area there. Puckboard, or it's HDPE, high density polyethylene. I use this because resin will not stick to it, and you can use it multiple times over and over. This sheet is a 1/4 inch thick. You can get it at most of your hardware stores. Like I said, you can use it multiple times, going on 6 years using this one piece. So one-time investment kind of thing. And then for the sides and the ends of the form, you can use either MDF or wood and just cover that in tuck tape, because resin will not stick to that either. Now, to ensure that resin doesn't leak underneath my form walls, I have silicone running underneath the entire perimeter of my form, plus I run a bead along the inside of the form, and then I'll run another bead along the outside of the form. Then you're going to want to clamp everything down so it doesn't move, and keep flex paste on hand, because I find flex paste is the only thing that stops a resin leak. I'm using deep casting resin from Designer Epoxy, and if you guys want to save 10% on epoxy, you can use my discount code. It is Dust and Wood 10. So go to Designer Epoxy, place your order, enter the discount code, and boom, you're saving money. Because this is going to be the floor of the box of a truck, it's only going to be 3/4 of an inch thick. And I'm worried that the blue is going to be very transparent, and I don't want it to be. So I mixed up some resin and I made it pitch black, or as black as I could make it. And I'm planning on doing a 1/4 inch pour black, and then I'm going to top up the rest with the color of the truck to try to match the color. But I'm hoping that that will prevent it from being transparent. Usually when I pour resin, I will put the resin into a vacuum chamber after I'm done mixing it, because when you're mixing it, you're introducing a whole bunch of air bubbles into that resin, and it is almost impossible to get rid of them unless you use a vacuum chamber. But because I'm doing this in 2 layers and you're not even going to see the black, I didn't worry about doing that. So all I did was I took a torch, I popped the bubbles, and let this cure up. Took about 5 days to get to a point where I could sand it and then do my top up layer of color. Prep sanding resin to get ready for a second pour. I just use about 120 grit sandpaper, give it a nice scuff, vacuum out any of the dust, and then you're ready to go. Now I did put this resin into a vacuum chamber, but as you pour, you are introducing more bubbles into the resin, and this just takes a quick torch and they're gone. What I like about using the vacuum chamber is it gets rid of so much air. A lot of times, if you're not using a vacuum chamber, as that resin cures, micro bubbles do start to form at like the 28-hour mark. So there's really nothing you can do about it at that point. So it's good to get ahead of it and use your vacuum chamber. Now, when it comes to resin and swirling, most of the time I like to just let the resin do its own thing and not manipulate it in any way, because I find it can almost look like it's been manipulated. But in this case, the pigments weren't swirling, the resin was just kind of sitting dead. So I had to do something about it, because this would have looked really boring if I didn't. You can see the resin is pretty thick here. I think this must have been around the 40-hour mark. This was definitely the right thing to do for this project. The swirl marks turned out really good. Didn't look like it was man-made at all. It just brought in that nice sheen that you can see in the pigments there. And I don't know, I guess it just brought it to another level. In the original design that Kris and I came up with, the bed was going to be split into two pieces with a piece of stainless or polished aluminum running up the center. But in this case, we actually ended up changing the design, so we didn't do any of that. But hey, that's okay. I mean, live and learn. It also kind of worked out better because I have a friend who has a 30-inch wide belt sander, and these two pieces fit perfectly through that, so we were able to get this to a perfect 3/4 of an inch thick using his belt sander. Now I'm back in my shop from the wide belt sander, and on the bottom side of this there was some air pockets that needed to be filled. Normally I would do this with either the Pro Series resin or the Art Cast resin, both from Designer Epoxy, but I had this bottle of UV resin that I never got to use because I didn't have a UV light to cure it. Well, now that I have a light, I thought I'd give it a shot.
Wow, that's hard. I can sand that. That is awesome.
With those little air bubbles filled in with resin, now I can go ahead and sand the bottom of these pieces, get everything trimmed to size, and cut out the wheel wells. With the two pieces cut to size, it was time to head over to Kris's shop so that we could do a test fit. And this is when we decided to change up our strategy.
In the original design for this, we were going to have it in two separate pieces and then run a piece of aluminum up the middle. Yesterday, when I took it over to Kris's shop, we put it in the back of the truck. We both agreed that it would look better if it was actually one solid piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my track saw and I'm going to rip a line, cutting both sides, just a little bit off each side, and that way we'll have a nice straight line on both edges, and then we're going to glue this back together and make this seam as minimal as possible. I mean, you're going to see a little bit of a seam, but I think it's going to look better than having a strip of aluminum up the middle. Once this is all done and it's in the truck and you see everything, I really don't think the seam is going to be the main focus anyway. Okay, it looks like we've got a really nice clean cut. So what I'm going to do now is clamp these pieces together and then draw some lines for my dominoes. I know I'm not going to be able to get the grain matched up 100%, but I'm going to do my best to get it close so we have nice alignment. Minimize this seam.
Now this is going to be more of a show truck than anything. That being said, the box is still going to be exposed to the outdoor elements where it can get hit by water, so it is important to use a waterproof glue, and I'm using Type Bond 3. All right, now we've got our bed glued back together, and I'm going to sand the bottom. I'm only sanding this to 120 grit because what I'm going to end up doing here is painting it with outdoor paint just to ensure that everything is actually waterproof. So I'll do a primer coat, and then I'm going to do a coat of black paint. And that black paint will also help to ensure that we do not see through this resin at all. Once the primer is dry, I'm just scuffing it up with 120 grit before I go ahead with the black paint. Once the paint is dried, I just have to flip it, sand to 220 grit, then I'm ready for finish.
This System 3 marine spar varnish is what I'm going to be using on this outdoor project. The first coat, it calls to mix the spar varnish with mineral spirits in a 1-to-1 mixture. That way it'll really thin this out and allow it to penetrate into the wood. And then for any coats after that, I don't need to mix it with mineral spirits. I can just apply it straight out of the can. I'm not quite sure how many coats I'm going to do. It says 3 to 4, but it also says for outdoor surfaces, you could do 9 to 12.
We don't have a huge area to cover. This next bit here was a major learning process. And it says on the can, for application, use a high quality brush with natural bristles. Where I live, I couldn't find a high quality brush with natural bristles, so I went with a nylon brush. You could definitely see the lines of the paintbrush. So what I ended up doing was taking blue shop towel afterwards and just wiping away any of the excess. And I knew this wasn't going to leave a really nice finish, but it was the first coat and I had plenty more to go. Plus I was sanding between coats, so I just wiped away the excess and left it like that for the day. I sanded between each coat with 360 grit from Mirka, the Abralon. It's kind of spongy and it's great for this kind of application.
So I've done 6 coats on this. You can see I've been brushing it on, so you can see the brush strokes. Not a huge fan of that at all. So I'm going to give this a light sanding, and then I'm going to try applying it with the buffer. Okay, I've got a handy little tip for you for when you're applying your finish. Personally, I like to use a white pad like this, throw it on my sander, and I can buff it in. What I don't like is these pads, the oil goes through and it gums up your sanding pad. So go get yourself some Velcro like this. This one works great. It comes in strips. I cut it into strips in the shape of my sanding pad, and I run these guys one way, then I put the backer piece on the other way so it all stays together, and then my pad just sticks to this and it protects my sanding pad from getting all gummed up. I've been using this for probably 4 years and it is finally just about done. Time to make a new one. But it'll save your pads because these aren't cheap. And the reason why this lasts so much longer than your sanding pad, like I said, 4 years almost, the Velcro in this is much more aggressive than the Velcro on here. It doesn't take a lot for this to gum up, or it takes quite a bit for this to gum up.
This method worked quite well. I applied it basically the same way that I apply my oil finishes now. Buffed it on, put a clean pad on the sander, and then buffed it off. I did go pretty fast with the sander, as I found the faster the sander spun, the better finish it left. Now that I've found a process that works good for the finish, I can take this over to Kris's shop where we can mark out where we're going to mount it, drill the pilot holes, drill the gas tank hole, then I'll take the bed back to my shop where I can finish drilling out these holes and apply finish to the inside of them.
This hole we thought originally needed to be 2 1/8 of an inch. Turns out it needs to be 2 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to show you my way of doing this. Get a scrap piece of wood. Okay, we've got our 2 1/8 hole, and here's our board with our 2 1/4 inch hole. I take a router with our flush trim bit. Well, there it is. We went from 2 1/8 to 2 1/4. Perfect. Now that I've drilled all of these holes in here, I'm just going to go with the varnish, my finish, and I'm going to coat the insides of the holes. Not so crucial on the resin, more so on the wood, but I'm going to do it on the resin as well.
This is the last step. Next thing, you just need to take it over to Kris's shop. We need to mount it in place, and there it is, all finished up. The gas can that you see there was Kris's idea. It's an old gas can. He painted it with clear, left the original red scratchy paint on it, and you actually fill up the truck through that gas can. You take the lid off, put the nozzle in there, and there's a hose that leads right into the gas tank. I appreciate you sticking around till the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. And if you've got a project in mind, reach out to me through email, dustandwood1@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your ideas.